society. And people who choose to be nurses, doctors, to work in social care are working in a sector that is about life. Whereas the people who are working in the sector that is producing arms and weapons of mass destruction are working in a sector that it is absolutely opposed to that. It is a sector about death. And we cannot continue to fund any sector that is anti-life. And that is how I see it completely. It is anti-life. Shortly after I was elected in 2014, I got invited to go to a really interesting and very important conference in Vienna. It was a conference organized by, I think it was the International Red Cross, and it was about the humanitarian consequences of nuclear war. And it was a conference that brought together lots of people from the health sector, but also agriculturalists, people working in environment, as well as people working in the peace movement and political actors. And it's a bleak picture, actually, because the science tells us that even if there is a small accidental nuclear detonation, there is going to be horrendous consequences for the immediate community, for the whole country, for the whole region, and for the whole world. A nuclear winter will wipe out a huge number of people. The level of the ability of the bombs and the arms that are being made now are far stronger in huge excess of the bombs that wiped out Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the idea that we can somehow or other countenance nuclear weapons and the possibility of an accidental detonation, let alone somebody pressing the button on purpose, again brings to mind a situation where our nurses and doctors could not cope, could not treat us, could not use their skills, in fact, to deal with this. So let's also bring that to mind as well, that these two things are in opposition to one another. I just want to say something as well about the gender perspective. Oh, it's a sign, isn't it? Because, and not just about nuclear weapons, but about nuclear power. In CND, we are also opposed to nuclear power because nuclear power is not a sustainable fuel, and the radiation and toxic waste from nuclear power will be live and will stay in the ground, will be in the atmosphere, in the water, in the local community for decades, if not centuries. And I want to pay tribute to Linda Pence-Gunter, who's not here today, but who is an expert on the subject of health and nuclear, and particularly women. Women suffer disproportionate impact on their health from the nuclear fission and from the radioactive waste. And we should also be talking about that when we're talking about issues around health and around nuclear too. And I'm saying this partly because many of the people who are making the decisions about nuclear in our country are men. All right? And it's not that I'm anti-men, because I'm not, right? We need you guys on this journey with us. But if you look at who's at the table when the deals are being done about military spending, it is largely men. And we have to demonstrate that women have a massive stake in this. We always pick up the pieces. We're not invited to the table when peace discussions are happening, and we suffer disproportionately from the nuclear industry. So let's talk also more widely about other sectors that have been suffering from austerity, because this is the People's Assembly Against Austerity. It began when the Tories brought in, with the Liberals, the age of austerity more than 10 years ago now. And actually, that is when I got political. That is when I decided I could no longer be a bystander. I would have to join a movement and make a difference. We cannot do things by ourselves. If you're not a member of CND, please join. If you're, we've got people here who can sign you up, but please be part of the peace movement. But we need to recognize that we also need youth workers, not nukes. We need teachers, not nukes. We need care workers, not nukes. We need nursery nurses, not nukes. We need musicians and artists and librarians, and not nukes. We don't need nukes. We need humanity and compassion and a decent society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'm going to ask the Bard of Bury if you will you please come up and read some poetry. He's the poet to the cause. No, mine are as well.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, thanks Jackie. Thanks Julie. Brilliant. Wise words, as we all know. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me here today. It's been a while since I saw since my comrades in CND, and it's just lovely to see you. And we're finally emerging from the shadows again, aren't we? Okay. This next piece is fairly new. It's called The Activist's Alphabet, and it's basically trying to help you stay encouraged. I mean, you don't need any of that, really. You're all here. But, you know, this is a kind of mark, the kind of people you are anyway. But don't give up. That's the message of this one. The Activist Alphabet. A is for activists stabbed in the back by anodyne traitors whose courage they lack. B is for Boris, who isn't your mate. He brings Brexit pain while encouraging hate. C is for COVID and Cummings and curse. So clap as you sing, things can only get worse. D is depression that lurks in our way as we plan for disease and disaster each day. E is elections, you thought fair and free, but media decides who our rulers shall be. F is for failure, the system's so broken, your X in the box was no more than a token. G is Great Britain, an outmoded name. I see the injustice, it fills me with shame. H is the hostile environment's toll that shows that this country has mortgaged its soul. I was inspired when Jeremy called for tolerance, freedom and justice for all. K is the contrast that looms cold and clear in the painted-on smile of some muppet named Kia. L is the love that we all need to thrive. M is the movement that keeps us alive. N is for never lose sight of the goal. OP is our promise to make this world whole. Q is for questioning, quirky and queer. Embrace your diversity, conquer your fear. R is reality, S is for stealth. T is the truth that they've stolen your wealth. U is the underground, planning to rise. V is the victory bright in our eyes. Join and we'll double you, double your power. We shall overcome, it will soon be the hour. X for extinction, the threat that looms big unless we can shackle those plutocrat pigs. Why bother, some ask? Why not give up the fight? Well, I want to rest peaceful and easy at night. When homelessness, racism, hunger are dead, and all the earth's children sleep safe in their beds. Jerusalem builded this peasant land red. I'll put down my sword and then clock up some Zs. Thank you. All right, that's very kind of you. A little bit of an experiment with this one now. I'm not sure what the working class activist credentials of the late Noel Coward were, but this is based loosely on one of his from way, way back. It's called Don't Let's Be Beastly, and I'll try and sing it in an even worse way than Noel Coward would have. Don't let's be beastly to the Tories, when our victory was oh so nearly won. It was just their greedy backers who lurched them to the right. How could they know the seeds they sowed would bring about this plight? Let's be meek to them, turn the other cheek to them, try to bring out their latent sense of fun. Let's give them some civility, attack them with humility, but don't put the blighters on the run. Don't let's be beastly to the media, despite their very far from neutral role. Let's swallow all their nonsense and let them spew their bile, though every ghastly thing they say makes our oppressors smile, and Pestenmar and Kunzberg really ought to be on trial. Let's not be judgmental, though it can't be accidental that the workers on the front line take the blame. We'll never be forgetting that a 100-year-old veteran put those media bastards all to shame. Don't let's be beastly to a poor Boris, as manfully he bears his heavy cross. Let's treat him very softly, as if he's our best mate, although his seedy antics push us to a grisly fate. And we know deep down he's sorry, not a word he'll ever state. Let's be kind to him, though it's matter over mind to him. Let him have some more days in the sun. Let's unleash no harm on him. Let's merely gently starmer him. But don't put the Tories on the run. I thank you. We'll get to some messages about peace and how we all need it, which you all know anyway. But I thought I'd give you this one because you won't have heard it yet. It's about a hollowed-out party. We've all been to some of them back in the 70s. Seems we've got one now as well. Different kind of party. Come to the hollowed-out party, the lamest scene around. Everybody's welcome in our post-industrial towns. We don't provide a message or sound a rousing call. We know the price of everything but the value of all. Come to the hollowed-out party. We think you'll have a blast, though the snacks are retro classics from a failed, reheated past. Come to the hollowed-out party, where there's always plenty space for careerists with sharp elbows who will lie right to your face. Come to the hollowed-out party, a policy-free zone. We haven't any bottles, so you'll have to bring your own. Not so much a pressure group, more like a pressure saw. Come to the hollowed-out party. Just leave your principles at the door. Thank you. Right, whizzing through this one. This is right up CND Street, I think. And I'll do this one. It's not very long, and then we'll see how we go. Daddy was a warrior. My daddy was a warrior, like many at the time. He left the farm in 34 and signed some dotted line. Then years later it went mental as the papers said it might, and millions marched and perished to defeat the fascist right. From Dunkirk to Kohima and all points in between, they really didn't talk so much about the things they'd seen. Destruction and damnation, broken bodies, shattered minds. There must be a better way for poor old humankind, resolving to make changes because somehow they'd survived. So many had that vision back in 1945. My babies were all born with the Cold War at its height, and I feared for their existence as I tucked them in at night. The wind was blowing cold, and the men on telly said, the way that things are going, man, we're hanging by a thread. Creating paranoia about the other tribe was keeping us compliant across their great divide. Maintaining isolation, it's the way they stay in power. And they make us feel the fear as we race to 0 hour. You'd better duck and cover, boy, obey and you'll survive. So much for that bullshit back in 1985. The world is ruled by warriors, yet everyone wants peace. We need a change of management, then we shall be released. They work for mass destruction, waste billions on their wars. Instead of buying weapons, they could feed and clothe the poor. Divide and rule's their method, and it keeps them at the top, but rising in our millions, we can tell them all to stop. We're here to send a message. We're here to use our voice, still standing at the crossroads, and the world must make a choice. not a burnt-out piece of carbon in the cold and dark of space, but on Earth of peace and plenty and a future we can all face. We can't betray our heritage, we daughters, we sons. Think what mums and daddies wanted when they handed in their guns. Thank you very much indeed. All right, tiny little one. This is in loving memory of our dear departed comrade, Betty Tebbs. She once told me it was her favourite poem, and that's a lovely thing for her to say to me. It's about civil disobedience and protest when we don't do what we're told. Forget Magna Carta, give me peasants' revolt. From the People's Charter to when women fought for the vote, from Dorset martyrs in the days of old, things get better when we don't do what we're told. From free education to sharing out the wealth, to old age pensions and the national health, hard-won achievements, not built in a day. But now the greedy Tories want to take them all away. In the struggle for survival and improvements for the poor, we may lose many battles, but still we'll win this war. Show the bastard rulers that we won't be bought and sold, because things get better when we don't do what we're told. So solidly together, be proud and brave and bold. Things get better when we don't do what we're told. We can seize the hour when we don't do what we're told. Victory is ours when we don't do what we're told. You got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're very kind. They make them well these days, don't they?
Thanks very much, Chris. I always love that one. It always reminds me of Betty. We're now going to hear from Pam Flynn, who is Chair of Greater Manchester and District CND. Thank you, Pam.
Well, the People's Assembly asked CND to talk a little bit about global Britain and foreign policy. And, yes, they asked us to talk about global Britain and foreign policy. And one could go on for hours, and I hope not to. I'm going to concentrate on the treaty, AUKUS, which you may have heard a little bit about, as though it was something funny. Martin Rowson did a cartoon in The Guardian the other day, and he had a vulture off to the side squawking AUKUS, as though it was something on the side of things. And it isn't. It's, I hope to be able to demonstrate to you that AUKUS is a symbol of significant militarization by the Johnson government. Julie mentioned that one of Johnson's first acts, well, in fact, his first act upon election to the leadership of the Tories was to visit a nuclear submarine up at Faslane. He's gone on, excuse me, he's gone on like this. He started as he meant to carry on. We have an increase in the nuclear arsenal of 140, I think it is, warheads. As if we need one, let alone hundreds more. And I think his current attitude could be summarised as a build-up of threat and militarism in general. So, this thing AUKUS, what is it? It's a new military alliance with the United States and Australia. And we've gone into it with an absolute minimum of public discussion and scrutiny. The pact, AUKUS, marks a serious escalation of the West's confrontation with China, increasing the militarization of the Asia-Pacific region, a region which is so important to the world economy, and it's ramping up the tensions with China at the risk of further nuclear proliferation and a new nuclear arms race. So it's the concretization of Johnson's vision for global Britain which demonstrates quite clearly that he has a military-first approach. And for CND, in many ways, this pact was to be expected, but the announcement was still quite a shock. There were some clues when Johnson laid out the big overhaul of foreign and defence policy in the Integrated Security and Defence Review, because it's put Britain on the offensive with the tilt towards the Indo-Pacific. There was another hint when, as I mentioned, he increased defence spending by 26% and then announced a 40% increase in the nuclear arsenal. Both of these were in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So we just smash a treaty. Now, we've come across Johnson doing this in several other cases, haven't we? If the treaty's not to his liking, he simply tosses it to one side. CND have actually taken legal opinion on this, and we have discovered that it is, of course, illegal to break a treaty. So we're now reporting Johnson to the United Nations. We'll see what comes of that. And then the third clue that we got that something was afoot was the decision to send the new state-of-the-art Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier to the South China Sea. And it's now halfway through 3 months of manoeuvres with 6 other naval task forces. Now, it's not really very much advertised, but the navies of India, Japan, Australia, and 3 naval cohorts from the United States are accompanying the QE2 on its travels through the South China Sea. And at the end of September, we went through the Taiwan Straits. And this was done really for no other reason than to say, well, we can, so we will. And we're a fleet of navies from the other side of the world, and why would we do this? It's to show some kind of muscle. And as you might expect, China didn't take it very well. They saw it as an act of aggression. I'll come back to that later. And then, so there's our clues. And we saw Trump withdraw from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and that left the United States free to set up medium-range missiles around China. And we also saw a thing called the revival of the Quad. Now, the Quad is not some courtyard through which we go for a stroll. It's the security partnership of the United States, Australia, Japan, and India. And that met recently in New York. So, what is AUKUS and what will it do? The United States and the UK are committing to helping develop Australia's nuclear capacity with 8 nuclear-powered submarines, as well as, in all likelihood, the nuclear reactors to produce the highly enriched uranium to fuel them. So this agreement sets a precedent for trade in highly enriched uranium. And enriched uranium is the core component of a nuclear bomb. And it opens the door for others to follow in what may well be a violation of this Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now, when AUKUS first hit us, I thought, why is it okay for Australia to have highly enriched uranium, and it's not okay for Iran to have it, despite the fact that Iran has always said that its enrichment process is entirely for civil purposes. Now, we might not want nuclear power, but why is it all right for one country, a white English-speaking country, predominantly, to do it, to have highly enriched uranium, and it's not all right for a Muslim country where people have brown skins to do exactly the same thing. Now, as we know, the Australians broke their deal with France for ordinary diesel electric submarines, to France's fury. The point is that nuclear-powered subs can stay undersea for much longer. So this would enable the Australian Navy to operate undetected underwater for a greater time. In other words, they're better at hunting down the enemy. It also improves Australia's long-range strike capabilities with the provision of US Tomahawk missiles, and it further covers close technological cooperation. Now, this is the bit that frightened me. It's cyber security, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. And the aim, for example, would be to develop underwater systems which would significantly destabilize the Asia-Pacific region by undermining the operation of China's submarines. Now, leaving aside the question of all these armaments and subs, you know, competing against each other underwater in the Indo-Pacific, it's all a nonsense. But what you've got is Australia, the United States, and the UK. We have no interests in the Indo-Pacific, really, but we've thrust ourselves in there as part of this global Britain. So it's a major upgrading of Australia as a military power, supplementing the massive deployment of United States strategic forces in the area and contributing significantly to the militarization in a region already marked by disputes and tensions. It's very, very dangerous move indeed. What else does this deal mean for Australia? Well, only 6 other powers have nuclear-powered subs. The 5 recognized nuclear weapons states, plus India. Australia will be the only one of these without nuclear weapons. In fact, Australia doesn't have a nuclear industry as such, and nuclear power stations are ruled out across its local states. As you can imagine, the Australian peace movement has had quite a lot to say about all of this. Without nuclear experience, Australia will be heavily reliant on United States and UK skills and expertise. So Johnson, of course, is touting this lot as part of the levelling up agenda because it's going to secure jobs in the export of nuclear technology and the export of high-level quantum computing and so on. Paying for the nuclear submarines and missiles, as well as all the running and maintenance costs and all the other commitments, will be extraordinarily expensive for Australia. Who's going to benefit? United States companies, Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, they've got their logos plastered all over the place, and BAE Systems is also well established. These all stand to gain, and the burden will fall on the Australian taxpayer. So Australian peace activists have got their work cut out for them, and CND stands in solidarity with them, and I'm sure that the People's Assembly does too. So I'm going to set this out now in the wider context of the United States and China relationships, remembering that Britain is hanging on the United States' coattails. AUKUS marks a new stage in the United States' plans to forge an Asian NATO. Johnson's Indo-Pacific tilt has so far followed Trump's initiative to revive the Quad. The Quad is the quadrilateral security dialogue between Australia, the United States, Japan, and India. This loose grouping was intended to draw India into a closer relationship with the United States, hence the term Indo-Pacific. Now, when Joe Biden succeeded Trump, he promised to return to multilateralism, and peace activists in the United States and here were initially hopeful that the foreign policies would improve both in relation to nuclear weapons and arms control and to the new Cold War on China. But this hasn't come about at all. If anything, Biden has so far turned out worse, holding to the view of China as the greatest strategic challenge to the United States. And he's made Quad diplomacy a priority. He's ramped up reconnaissance of the Chinese coast with daily or even twice daily missions, as well as making more frequent incursions into the Taiwan Straits. I mentioned earlier that our aircraft carrier has just gone into the Straits. No, it's a Corvette, actually. It's a bit smaller, because the Straits are smaller. And then, using a more ideological approach than Trump, Biden clearly aims to shift international opinion against China as an existential threat to the whole world. And it's fair to say that the announcement of AUKUS took the world unawares. So, with regard to this, you could argue that Biden is pretty much like Trump, provocative and unpredictable. Hardline Cold Warriors have been calling on key allies to form a single economic, technological and military bloc, abasing China. And AUKUS is the result. It's a new type of military alliance built around arms deals, integrating militarized economies and technologies across borders. So next time you hear that jobs are secure at Rolls-Royce and BAE and up at Barrow, bear in mind that that is actually the effect. So how will China react to AUKUS? And what about Russia, which has got its own Pacific seaboard? Russia could begin new naval reactor cooperation with China to boost China's submarine capabilities. Then there's North Korea. And North Korea has already warned that AUKUS could trigger a nuclear arms race. It raises the United States' new Cold War on China to a different level of confrontation. So, does the United States, closely followed because we're hanging on their coattails with our membership of NATO, does it intend to go to war on China? China has clearly been able to withstand the United States' trade and technology wars, but Biden's intent now seems to be to exert enough pressure to force China's subordination to United States leadership and controls. But China, of course, has responded by saying, you try and crack our heads and we'll come for yours. So it's quite a dangerous situation. China's military spending is only 1/3 that of the United States. Its navy is quite large, but these forces consist largely of Coast Guard vessels. There's hardly any ocean-going capacity, and they've only got 2 aircraft carriers, whereas the United States has got 11 carriers. And of course, the UK has got 2. So, the military spending in China, 1/3 that of the US. The United States has got 800 military bases around the world. About 400 of them actually encircle China. China has just got 1 military base beyond its territory. It's not our enemy. We may have differences with China, but if we want China to become more militaristic, if we want China to become an enemy, then AUKUS is the way to go. So what must we do about all of this? I just want to talk first, before I move into that, onto the issue of militarism, nuclear weapons, arms deals, and climate change. Because the military-industrial complex is one of the largest causal factors in carbon emissions and environmental degradation anywhere, well, everywhere where we see these bases. So on the question of climate change, in the run-up to COP26, the climate emergency is top of the agenda. We should be doing more, and so should China. But how can China do more with the US continually rallying allies to hinder its development? It's a rhetorical question. There's no easy answer to it. But increasing military competition can only undermine the broader international cooperation that we need to reverse the existential threats of the climate emergency and pandemics. So we're in a mess. And a spokesperson from the Independent and Peaceful Australia Network said recently, "We've only just withdrawn from Afghanistan, a generation-long invasion that is still causing untold devastation. Without taking a breath, we've gone from following the US into one catastrophe to committing ourselves to another." So, that's AUKUS and the Tory government. A piece of good news, and what we can do, is that at the Labour Party conference, there was an emergency resolution tabled by a number of Labour Party constituency parties, including Stockport. And Stockport CLP, there are 2 representatives here, and congratulations to Sheila and Phoebe and others for putting this emergency resolution onto the Labour Party agenda. It was moved by Shipley and by Brighton Pavilion, and it was passed overwhelmingly. I won't read it to you because it's long, but you can get a copy of it from GM CND on request, and we will be discussing it at a future meeting. Anyway, the good news was that the resolution was carried overwhelmingly. I'm going to just bore you for a moment with statistics, because you might have thought that with the emphasis on secure jobs in defence, that the trade union bloc would vote down this emergency resolution, and they didn't. The good news is that 1,372,064 affiliates to the Labour Party actually voted for the emergency resolution condemning AUKUS, with only 1/3 against. And then the constituency Labour parties, there were a couple of 100,000 for and half that number against. So the resolution was carried by 70%, 70.35%, with 29.65% against. And that was done on a card vote. Now, the leadership, of course, Keir Starmer welcomed AUKUS in Parliament. So we've got a stage set fair for some more arguments about the voice from the bottom up and what will happen. And we have to see. And I commend to you Kate Hudson's blog on the CND website, which analyses the current state of play on AUKUS and on international treaties, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the treaty, the United Nations Treaty. Remember them, the United Nations. The treaty on the complete prohibition of nuclear weapons is coming up to its first year review soon. And Malaysia and Indonesia, which are not a million miles away from China, Malaysia signed as soon as the treaty was open for signature on the 20th of September 2017, and it ratified the treaty on the 30th of September 2020. And Indonesia has signed it, but not yet ratified it. And so the first meeting of the states parties on the UN treaty is going to be held in early 2022. So I'm going to sum up now by saying that the UK, global Britain, is determinedly militaristic. And we have to oppose this, all peace-loving people, as Chris Bainbridge said, the Bard of Bury, in more poetic ways than I. But what can you do? Well, if you're not already a member, or your trade union branch is not already a member of CND, please join. And if you're in the Labour Party, please engage with Labour CND. And we have got resolutions which you can put to your trade union branches and to trade union CND. So I hope I haven't blinded you with too much verbiage. We're going to hear from the Clarion Choir in a minute, and then there may be an opportunity for a few questions. But in absolute summary, please join CND and join this struggle with us. Thank you.
And then we're going to finish off unless anybody has any absolutely biting questions that they want to ask. Thank you.
Choir in Bolton, And we're just going to sing one more song that's from Pete Seeger. One person's hands. One person's hands, and I'll sing with you. One person's